always thought I had time. Time to study later. Time to get serious later. Time to grow up later. That illusion shattered the night I chose a party over my future. It started like any other wild night. My friend Jared was throwing one of his legendary parties, the kind everyone talked about for weeks afterward. I told myself I'd just stop by for a little while. One drink, maybe two. Then I'd go home and study for my final exam in the morning. The moment I walked inside, reality blurred. Music shook the walls, lights flashed, and someone was literally dancing on a pole in the living room. Jared grinned when he saw me and handed me a cup filled with some bright purple drink. I didn't ask what was in it. I just drank. A few minutes later, he pulled out a small bag of mushrooms and asked if I wanted to go chill in the shed and trip. That should have been my sign to leave. Instead, I followed him. That's where everything spiraled. I had way more than I should have. My heart started racing. My chest felt tight. My thoughts scattered in every direction. I panicked, collapsed, and someone started doing chest compressions on me. I honestly thought I was dying. Then something strange happened. In the middle of the chaos, I suddenly felt calm. Not normal calm, unreal calm. I stood up and felt like I'd unlocked some secret truth about life. Like nothing really mattered. Like fear was optional. It felt profound at the time, but in reality, I was just high and completely disconnected from reality. I remembered the dancer inside and decided I was going to challenge her to a pole dance battle, because obviously that made sense in my altered state. But I never made it. On my way back inside, I tripped over a broken wooden plank and smashed face first into a wall. Everything went black. I don't know how long I was out, but when I woke up, I was still lying on the ground. My head throbbed. My clothes were dirty. My brain felt like static. Then I checked my phone. 9:30 a.m. My exam had started at 9 o'clock. My heart dropped straight into my stomach. I jumped up so fast I knocked over a lamp, which shattered beside me. I didn't care. My mind was screaming one thing. You missed your final. I threw on my clothes and realized I only had one shoe. I tore through the backyard, frantically searching, until I spotted the other shoe wedged under the same broken plank I'd tripped over. I shoved it on and ran. That's when I noticed something worse. My car keys were locked inside my car. I stared through the window at them, sitting right there on the seat, mocking me. I didn't even remember how that happened. All I knew was that I was hungover, exhausted, panicking, and completely stranded. I sprinted toward the nearest bus stop, praying a bus would magically appear. Of course it didn't. There had been an accident on the route, and no one knew when the next bus would come. Desperate, I tried ordering a ride. Just as I found a driver nearby, my phone dropped to 1%. It asked for my credit card information. I scrambled for my wallet, typing as fast as I could. My phone died. I stood there gasping for air with no car, no phone, and no plan. So I did the only thing left. I started running. Campus was 2 miles away. I was not in running shape. But I had no other choice. I dodged a cyclist who almost ran me over, then tripped on uneven pavement near a construction site and crashed face first into the dirt. My ankle twisted painfully. My clothes were soaked in mud. I didn't stop. I limped the rest of the way, sweating, shaking, and running on pure adrenaline. When I finally reached the exam center, I looked like a disaster. Wet-soaked, mud-covered, ankle on fire. But I made it. Or so I thought. I rushed to the door, and the security guard stopped me. "You're late," he said. Begged. I explained. I rambled. I pointed to my ankle, my clothes, the mud. None of it mattered. "I can't let you in," he said. "You missed the cutoff." Just like that, it was over. I walked away in silence, my mind numb. And I had no idea this was only the beginning. Missing the exam was devastating, but what happened next would completely change my life. I don't even remember walking home. My body moved, but my mind was stuck in that moment. The door closing, the guard shaking his head, the finality of it all. My chest wasn't tight from running anymore. It was tight from fear. I kept imagining my parents' faces when I told them. My dad had warned me about Jared countless times. said he was a bad influence, said I needed to take my studies seriously. And now I had proven him right in the worst possible way. Each step home felt heavier than the last, like I was walking toward a sentence instead of a house. I didn't even bother making excuses. What excuse could explain missing a final because of a party and a blackout? A week later, I checked my dorm mailbox and saw a letter from my college. My stomach sank before I even opened it. Inside was the confirmation. I had failed the year. My other grades weren't strong enough to make up for the missed exam. I would have to retake all my classes. Just like that, everything I'd worked for vanished. I called my parents hoping, foolishly, that maybe they'd be supportive. They weren't. My dad was furious. He said I was irresponsible, reckless, and wasting my life. My mom kept asking how I could be so stupid. They told me they wouldn't help me financially anymore. No tuition, no rent, no support. This is on you, my dad said. You need to learn the hard way. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just hung up. That summer I worked 2 full-time jobs. One was at a fast food place, flipping burgers, dealing with angry customers, cleaning grease off surfaces that never stayed clean. The other was at a warehouse, stacking boxes, loading trucks, lifting heavy shipments for hours on end. Barely slept. My life became a cycle of exhaustion. Wake up, work, work again, collapse, repeat. The warehouse job was brutal. Long shift, no sympathy. Supervisors who didn't care if you were sore, tired, or injured. One day, a stack of boxes tipped over and crashed onto me. I ended up with a deep cut on my arm that needed stitches. I didn't even take time off. I wrapped it, showed up the next day, and kept working. Physically, I was drained. Emotionally, I was worse. Every time I saw my parents, they criticized me, called me a failure, reminded me how disappointed they were. Felt like no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. At night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying that night over and over. The drink, the shed, the fall, the exam door, a letter, phone call, all because of one stupid decision. Halfway through the summer, something strange started happening at the warehouse. There was this guy, a coworker I hadn't really noticed before, who kept watching me. Not in a creepy way. More like curious. Like he saw something I didn't. One day during my break, I was sitting on a stack of crates, barely staying awake, coffee in hand. He walked up and introduced himself as Ben. "How are you holding up?" he asked. Shrugged. "Fine." It wasn't true, but I didn't feel like explaining. Instead of leaving, he sat down and started talking about his own life. How he'd partied too much when he was younger, messed up his education, and ended up working at the warehouse. I didn't care at first. Everyone has a story. Then he said something that stuck with me. "Sometimes life gives you a second chance," he said. "Even when you don't deserve it. The trick is recognizing it." I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what he meant. But for some reason I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few days later, Ben would offer me something that sounded impossible, and I had no idea it would change everything. A few days after that conversation, Ben approached me again during my break. This time his tone was different, more serious. "I might know someone who can help you," he said. I almost laughed. Help me how? No one could undo what I'd done. No one could magically fix my academic disaster. But Ben wasn't joking. He told me he had a friend who worked in admissions at another college. Not my school. A different one. He said this person might be able to pull some strings, maybe get me into a program where I could start fresh. First I thought it was a joke. Why would anyone do that for me? Yes. Ben shrugged. "I've seen how hard you're working. You deserve a second chance." I didn't know how to respond. The idea felt too good to be true. Like one of those stories that only happens in movies. Still, he gave me his friend's contact information and told me to think about it. For days, I went back and forth in my head. What if it was a scam? What if I got my hopes up just to be disappointed again? What if this was another distraction that pulled me away from taking responsibility? But then I thought about my current reality. Exhausted, broke, stuck, and heading nowhere fast. What did I really have to lose? So I reached out. After a few conversations, it became clear that Ben hadn't exaggerated. His friend actually could help. He asked about my situation, my grades, my work ethic, my goals. He didn't sugarcoat anything, but he didn't judge me either. Few weeks later I got the news. I was accepted. It wasn't a top-tier school. It wasn't glamorous. But it was a fresh start, and the tuition was significantly cheaper. When I told my parents, their reaction was mixed. My dad was skeptical. He thought it was another one of my get-rich-quick ideas that would fail. My mom didn't say much at all. But for the first time in months I didn't care. Finally felt hope. Starting over wasn't easy. I still had to work to pay for tuition. But the new program offered evening classes, which allowed me to keep both jobs. It was exhausting, but this time the exhaustion felt different. This time I was working toward something. A few months into the program, I learned something that shocked me. Ben's friend wasn't just some admissions officer. He was the dean of the college. That's when it hit me. Ben hadn't helped me out of pity. He saw potential in me, even when I couldn't see it myself. Slowly, things started to turn around. My grades improved. I got better at managing my time. I started to feel confident again. Not fake confidence, but the kind built on discipline and effort. Then one day something unexpected happened. I was working my fast food job when Jared walked in. I hadn't seen him since the night of the party. He looked different. Tired. Worn. Like life had hit him just as hard as it had hit me. We talked for a while. He told me things hadn't gone well for him either. He'd dropped out of college and was now working at his dad's auto shop. He apologized for that night, said he felt guilty for pushing me and not making sure I got home safely. It wasn't really his fault, but I could tell he carried the weight of it. He even offered to help me financially. Said his dad's business was doing well and he could lend me some money. I was tempted. But I said no. I didn't want to go back to depending on someone else to save me. For the first time in my life I was standing on my own, and I didn't want to mess that up. We left on good terms. But seeing Jared like that made me realize something. Without Ben, without that chance, that could have been me. And yet, even as things improved, the hardest part of my journey was still ahead. The rest of the year moved fast, but not easily. Balancing 2 full-time jobs and college classes was brutal. My days started before sunrise and ended long after dark. Some nights I barely slept. Some mornings I questioned whether I had the strength to keep going. But I did. Not because it was easy, but because quitting wasn't an option anymore. For the first time I wasn't just surviving. I was building. Every assignment I completed felt like proof that I wasn't the failure my parents believed I was. Every exam I passed felt like a small redemption. Still, the emotional weight didn't disappear. My relationship with my parents remained strained. They were proud of my progress, but the distance between us lingered. It felt like they were always waiting for me to mess up again. And honestly, I couldn't blame them. I had given them plenty of reasons not to trust me. There were nights when I lay awake, wondering if I'd ever fully repair that damage. Wondering if one mistake could permanently redefine how people see you. But slowly, something inside me shifted. I stopped seeing myself as the kid who messed up. I started seeing myself as someone who made a mistake, and chose not to let it define them. The new program challenged me in ways I hadn't expected. The workload was intense. The expectations were high. But instead of running from responsibility, I leaned into it. I asked for help when I needed it. I showed up early. I stayed late. I treated my education like something fragile, something I couldn't afford to waste again. One night, after finishing a long shift at the warehouse, I sat alone in my car and realized something strange. I was tired. But I wasn't hopeless. That was new. Months passed, and my grades continued to improve. Professors noticed my effort. One even told me, "You're one of the hardest working students I've seen this semester." That sentence meant more to me than any party ever could. I still struggled. I still doubted myself. I still felt the weight of my past. But I kept going. Then graduation day arrived. Standing there in my cap and gown, I felt a mix of emotions: pride, relief, sadness, and disbelief. My parents were there, sitting in the audience. They smiled. They clapped. But the emotional distance hadn't fully disappeared. Still, they showed up. And that mattered. As I walked across the stage, I didn't just think about the diploma. I thought about the night in the shed. The broken plank. The locked car keys. The security guard. The warehouse. The stitches. Jared. Every step that had led me here. I had taken the second chance I was given, and I had not wasted it. But what surprised me most wasn't the success. It was the person I had become. More disciplined. More self-aware. More responsible. More grateful. I didn't just recover from my mistake. I transformed because of it. But the biggest lesson I learned wasn't about school. It was about life itself. Looking back, I used to think the worst thing that happened to me was missing that final exam. Now I realize something else. The worst thing wasn't the failure. It was who I was before it. I was careless, entitled, reckless. I assumed things would always work out, not because I worked for them but because they always had. Missing that exam didn't just derail my education. It exposed my mindset. For the first time, I had to face real consequences. No shortcuts. No safety nets. No one coming to save me. And strangely enough, that's exactly what I needed. Working those 2 jobs taught me discipline. The warehouse taught me humility. The fast food job taught me patience. The rejection taught me accountability. And Ben taught me something I'll never forget. That sometimes someone believes in you before you believe in yourself. That belief didn't erase my past. Didn't excuse my mistakes. But it gave me a reason to fight for my future. I learned that growth doesn't come from comfort. Comes from discomfort. Comes from exhaustion. Comes from facing your flaws instead of running from them. I also learned something about people. Some people like Jared aren't bad, they're just lost. And sometimes, lost people lead other lost people further away from where they should be. But others, like Ben, show up quietly. Not to judge, not to lecture, but to offer a ladder when you're stuck in a hole. The difference between staying stuck and climbing out often comes down to one moment, one decision, one person. For me, that moment was saying yes to a second chance. Even when I didn't believe I deserved it. And maybe that's the real secret. You don't have to deserve a second chance. You just have to use it. So what would I tell anyone standing where I once stood? Exhausted, lost, and convinced they've ruined everything. If you're reading this and thinking, I've messed up too badly, there's no coming back, let me tell you something. Thought that too. I thought my life was over because of one night. One exam. One mistake. But I was wrong. Failure doesn't end your story. Avoiding responsibility does. Growth doesn't happen when things go right. It happens when things go wrong and you choose not to stay down. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to take the next right step. And then the next. And then the next. No one fixes their life overnight. I didn't. Took months of exhaustion. Years of rebuilding. Countless moments of doubt. But every step forward, no matter how small, added up. If you've lost time, you can rebuild discipline. If you've lost trust, you can rebuild integrity. If you've lost direction, you can rebuild purpose. But only if you stop running from your mistakes and start learning from them. The night I missed my exam felt like the end of my life. Now I see it was the beginning of my growth. Forced me to face myself. Forced me to change. And it forced me to become someone I actually respect. So if you're standing at rock bottom, here's the truth. Rock bottom isn't a grave. It's a foundation. What you build on it is up to you. Your worst mistake might just be the moment that creates your strongest version. If you let it.